Making a Mason in Prison, the John Wilkes exception. In Volume 3, Part 1, page 61 of Ars Quatuor Coronatorum, we can read that John Wilkes, a journalist and radical politician, was made a Mason on Friday, March 3rd, 1769. Further, that at his initiation he was in prison. The Gentleman's Magazine, a famous newspaper founded in 1731, reported the following. We shall be excused by our readers for amusing them with the following anecdote. All societies and all parties were carried away with the popular frenzy of WILKES and liberty, and among the rest, the quiet and peaceable Freemasons came in for the share. March 3rd, 1769, the members of the lodge, held at the Jerusalem Tavern in Clerkenwell, attended at the King's Bench prison and made Mr. Wilkes a Mason. So we know from this that John Wilkes was made a Mason by the members of the Jerusalem Tavern's lodge in Clerkenwell, London. But who were they? Lane's Masonic records report that the Jerusalem Tavern's Lodge was a lodge active since 1771. So, were they irregular Masons? Probably not, because we know that there was another Jerusalem Lodge, which was warranted in 1731, and which changed its meeting place twice as the tavern changed as well. David Hervé was editor of a Gentleman's Magazine from 1754 after the death of Edward Cave, or Sylvanus Urban as he signed himself. The magazine was in fact written and printed in the Jerusalem Tavern itself, at St. John's Gate, so we might be forgiven for assuming that the author's sources must have been accurate. In 1762, David Henry married the widow of Mr. Newell, formerly the master of the Jerusalem Tavern. So, he also owned the tavern where the lodge met. John Wilkes, 17th October 1725, 26 December 1797, was the son of Israel Wilkes, a malt distiller. He was a journalist and a radical politician. The accuracy paper reports. He was a man of shrewd parts, most strengthened by profound erudition, but it is to be lamented that his genius and talents were shaded by scepticism and licentiousness. Elected Member of Parliament for Aylesbury in 1757, he created in 1762 a weekly newspaper, the North Briton, which attacked George III and John Stuart, 3rd Earl of Bute, who was then the Prime Minister. Wilkes was angry with what he felt were too generous peace terms given to France at the end of the 7 Years' War. Great Britain had gained the bulk of New France in North America, Spanish Florida, some Caribbean islands in the West Indies, the colony of Senegal, and superiority of the French trading outposts on the Indian subcontinent. For Wilkes, this was still not enough. Even more, Wilkes hated his Prime Minister most for being a Scot. The name of his newspaper was chosen in response to The Briton, a pro-government newspaper published by Tobias Smollett only a week after its publication. It was an anonymous paper, but everyone knew that Wilkes was behind it. So when in the issue number 45, a symbolic number for the Jacobite movement, the North Briton attacked a royal speech of George III, praising the Treaty of Paris, Wilkes and 48 other people were arrested for seditious libel. When you read the article, you understand why. As a Member of Parliament, he was protected by statutes and was quickly released. However, Parliament voted that his privilege from arrest did not extend to the writing and publishing of seditious libels. Wilkes wisely moved to Paris and didn't return until 1768. Re-elected as a parliament member, he was then arrested and detained at King's Bench prison, an event which led to the massacre of St. George's Field on 10th May 1768, where a crowd of 15,000 citizens came to riot or support Wilkes and were hunted down by the troops. 7 people were killed, including one young man, William Allen, mistaken for a rioter. The Irish playwright and government supporter Hugh Kelly made a defense of the government's right to use force against Whig supporters. This in turn led to a riot at the production of Kelly's new play, A Word to the Wise, at the Drury Lane Theatre, forcing the production to be abandoned. Wilkes received a 22-month sentence for blasphemy and seditious libels on 8th June and was also expelled from the House of Commons. Naturally, some of his friends tried to help him in many ways, including bringing him into Freemasonry under a dispensation from the Grand Master. He was initiated with others such as George Bellas, Lewis Francis Bourgeois, Captain Reed, and John Churchill. But how could an initiation ceremony have been performed in a prison? Part of the answer was given by John Emile to Cécile Révauger in their correspondence, where he said, Denslow, in his 10,000 Famous Freemasons, is correct in stating that John Wilkes was initiated by members of a Jerusalem's Lodge number 44. What is problematical is whether the event took place in prison or whether John Wilkes was allowed out on parole for the event, as was possible as he was in a debtor's prison. The press reports of his initiation state that it took place in the prison, but this was later denied by the Masonic authorities, as holding a meeting in prison was contrary to Masonic rules. The minute book of Jerusalem Lodge, unfortunately, does not state where the meeting took place. But the legend has remained, and some other papers, like the Lloyd's Evening Post, continued this story. Lloyd's Evening Post, also known as Lloyd's Evening Post and British Chronicle, was a British evening newspaper published 3 weekly in London from 1757 to 1808, founded shortly after the London Chronicle and similar in format. It came out on Monday, Wednesday and Friday, alternating in friendly rivalry with the London Chronicle, which came out on Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday. It is though proper to acquaint the public that I, in the presence of 2 grand officers, and by virtue of a general dispensation dated February 2, 1769, signed by the Deputy Grand Master, did make Mr. Wilkes a free and accepted Mason. The dispensation may be seen by any Mason at the Jerusalem Lodge, number 44 on Lodge Night. Thomas Dawson, Master. George Bellas and John Churchill, who were also initiated that night, were members of a society created only a few days before their initiations. The Society of the Gentlemen Supporters of a Bill of Rights, founded on 20th February 1769 and consisting of many Freemasons. Created 3 days ago after the eviction of Wilkes from his new parliament seat in February, it was primarily to support the political career of John Wilkes, the leadership of the society, and most notably Reverend John Horne. Subsequently took steps to broaden its aims to include a full program of radical reforms. It is certain that the Wilkes initiation was a political matter between engaged Masons who were in the public life of London. However, it raises the question as to whether Wilkes fulfilled the requirement in his obligation to be free and of good report. Anderson's constitutions noted, The persons admitted members of a lodge must be good and true men, freeborn, and of mature and discreet age, no born men, no women, no immoral or scandalous men, but of good report. For his supporters, John Wilkes was a man of good report, good and true, member of so many clubs that no one knows the list by heart, freeborn, of mature and discreet age, not a bondman or woman. The only thing which could have stopped him was that he was an immoral and scandalous man, but apparently that didn't matter. Was his initiation a mistake? The Freemasons magazine and Masonic Mirror from October 27th, 1860 noted. And so the story continues to join other stories in Freemasonry which are difficult to prove due to conflicting evidence or sometimes no evidence at all. The name of John Wilkes has become synonymous, however, with political dissent. John Wilkes was 32 years old when his newspaper began its attacks on the establishment. Only 5 years after this article in the Freemasons magazine, a 27-year-old John Wilkes Booth, named after John Wilkes, would murder Abraham Lincoln because of political dissent. John Wilkes Booth was also reputed to be a 33rd-degree Freemason, while Lincoln himself had petitioned to join the order after his term in office. In later life, John Wilkes became less radical. In later life, John Wilkes became less radical. He became Lord Mayor of London, Master of the Joiners' Company, and a magistrate who defended the Bank of England with troops. He died in his bed, in his house, in Grosvenor Square, London, at the age of 72. Sorry for my bad accent. I'm French. French.